Alrighty, folks, it's 7 o'clock. So, good evening and welcome to tonight's Farminar. I'm Steve Carlson, a staff member at Practical Farmers of Iowa here in the PFI office in Ames. And tonight's Farminar topic is effective mentor relationships. And we've got two speakers leading the topic for us. Denise O'Brien at Rolling Acres Farm in Atlantic, Iowa. She farms there with her husband, Larry Harris. And they have a lot of experience mentoring beginning farmers, both informally and then through Practical Farmers of Iowa, and also the Women in Food and Agriculture Network, which Denise helped co-found. And also speaking tonight is Allie Clark, who is a beginning farmer along with Scott Yahnke at Little Mountain Farm. They are in our Savings Incentive Program, which paired them up with Denise and Larry to learn from them. So we'll hear from both the mentee and the mentor on their tips for an effective mentor relationship. But before I hand it over to them, I'm going to say a few things about PFI. So this is the remaining schedule for our Winter Farminar series. There's still plenty of topics coming up. Next week is on grazing and free choice minerals. You can get all of these descriptions and speaker bios on the website. All of these are at 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights, except we've got two that are part of a two-part series on perennial crops, Friday, March 10th and 17th, and those will be at the noon hour. If you ever miss one, we do record these and put them in our archives. So, Practical Farmers of Iowa started back in 1985, over 30 years ago now, by a group of farmers who were interested in improving their profitability, efficiency, and stewardship. And today we're still focused on those issues, but are now made up of farmers from all enterprises and farms from all sizes across the state and outside of Iowa as well. The PFI mission is strengthening farms and communities through farmer-led investigation and information sharing. Our values are welcoming everyone, creativity, collaboration, and community, viable farms now and for future generations, and stewardship and ecology. As a member-based organization, we'd like to have you consider joining us. As a member, you can tap into our network of diverse members, and that includes access to our email discussion lists on topics like row crops, cover crops, livestock, horticulture, policy. We also will give you our quarterly newsletters. You get big discounts to our events, and you can participate in all of our programming like on-farm research and some of the beginning farmer programs I'm going to mention here in a minute. We just had our big annual conference in Ames, so hopefully some of you were able to join us for that. It really was a fantastic weekend, but there's still a lot of other events happening this winter time, and we've got a calendar on our website that has all those things compiled there. So I encourage you to check those out and get plugged in. Two of these events that are coming up soon, I wanted to highlight in particular. They're both going to be held in Strawberry Point, Iowa on February 10th and 11th. So that's the same time, same location. And one is led by Holistic Management International and is geared toward established fruit and vegetable growers, called Advanced Financial Planning. And then the other event is our 9th annual Beginning Farmer Retreat for beginning and aspiring farmers, which is a really fun event that we do every winter. So these two groups will share meal times and networking time, but have separate workshops and activities. And so they're both offered at a really reasonable price and have a limited capacity, and registration ends this week. So again, visit practicalfarmers.org to get more information about these upcoming events. Hopefully you can join us. And then, since tonight's topic is about mentors, I wanted to mention the ways that PFI can help connect mentors with mentees. Feel free to talk to me about any of this stuff if you have questions. But first, we have for aspiring farmers, we have a program called Labor for Learning that helps connect experienced farmers who are looking to hire an employee with aspiring farmers who are looking for on-farm experience. And then we ask that the experienced farmers spend a small amount of time training on topics that most employees don't really get experience with, like could be record keeping or marketing, and it's really determined by the mentor and the mentee there. And so right now we're currently recruiting experienced farmers to participate this year. So you can go to our website for more information or talk to me if you're interested in being a part of this as either the trainer or the trainee. And then here in February, we're going to post the job opportunities that our beginning farmers can peruse. So then the other program that we have for formal mentorship is our Savings Incentive Program, and that helps beginning farmers who have started out on their own establish successful farm businesses. So it's a 2-year program that pairs you with a mentor, matches up to $2,400 that you save for a total of $4,800, and it helps you complete a business plan over that time period as well. And so for that program, we accept applications starting in August. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Again, there's a web page with a lot more information. And then, as you'll hear from our speakers today, another way to establish a mentor relationship through Practical Farmers of Iowa is just to participate in local events with other farmers and to meet new people. We try to coordinate regional socials for this very purpose of networking, so we put those on our calendar. So definitely plug into those if you're interested. Now, finally, real quick, like I said in the chat box there, if you want to stay in touch with PFI's Farminars, you can provide us with your email address and I'll put you on our list. And also, it's pretty fun to see where everybody's tuning in from. So if you want to type in the chat box your location, that's kind of cool. And then if you haven't noticed, on the very bottom left corner of the screen, we have a little poll that just helps us get a head count of how many people are watching. So if there's a couple of you tuning in from one computer, just make sure you mark that box so we can kind of get a head count. And while our presenters are talking, feel free to use that chat box to ask clarifying questions, and then when they're done speaking, we're going to save about 30 minutes for all other questions. So be thinking of those questions as we go along, and don't hesitate to use the chat box. And then finally, when we are near the end of the Farminar, I'm going to post a link to take a very short survey about the Farminar, so please take a minute to give us a little bit of feedback and suggest topics that you want to hear about in the future. So that's all that I've got to say. I'm going to pull up Allie Clark's presentation and let Allie take it over from here. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right, so I'm Allie Clark, and I'll be representing both Scott and I and our farm, which is Little Mountain Farm, and sharing some of our experiences having met Denise and Larry and having them as our mentors. So without further ado, I'll get started. Just a second. Okay, so our farm is called Little Mountain Farm, and we started our operation last year in Honey Creek, Iowa. And it was our first season. We grew on rented land. Both Scott and I have previous experience on farms. I have worked with the urban farm in Omaha, Nebraska called Big Muddy Urban Farm. And Scott has various farm experiences, and he currently works in Omaha at the Omaha Home for Boys as their agriculture program coordinator. So prior to 2016, we had been dreaming of having our own vegetable operation and had connected with a farmer who had been farming at this location since 2000. And she was open to renting it as she's in the process of transitioning out of farming. So we were able to rent about an acre of land. Last year, we grew diverse vegetables, flowers, and herbs, and had some exposure to season extension through a high tunnel that was already on site. We marketed our produce through an 18-member CSA, which had delivery in Omaha and an on-farm pickup. And we participated in a farmer's market weekly through the season and maintained a restaurant account with the Kitchen Table restaurant in Omaha. And through the Savings Incentive Program of PFI, we were paired with Larry and Denise to have them as our mentors. So one of the elements of the Savings Incentive Program mentorship is that you have 3 mentorship visits. And so one of them is at your mentor's farm, one is at your own farm, and one is at another location. Our first visit, or I guess I'll go in the order that it's listed on the slide, not necessarily the order that we visited, but our on-farm visit at Rolling Acres Farm, which is Denise and Larry's farm, gave us an opportunity to see their operation and see the different types of equipment that they're using for their operation and some of the infrastructure that they have in place. It also gave us an opportunity to see how they're implementing their system for their operation and see what they've learned over the course of the different years that they've been farming there. When Denise came to visit our farm, it gave us an opportunity to look more critically at our own operation through the lens of her experience and identify some different ways to improve our system. Our third visit was at a friend's farm, a mutual friend's farm, Botnaburo Farm in Hancock, Iowa. And that was a neat experience because both of us had been there previously, but it gave us an opportunity to talk through the Botnaburo's farm operation and how it compared and contrasted to our own operations. Uh, so I just want to take an opportunity here to talk about the importance, in my opinion, of visiting farms and having the opportunity to see other operations. And to do this, I want to share an experience that I had when I first got started farming with Big Muddy Urban Farm. So in this era, when we're all of our farms are pretty tapped into social media and sharing images of our farm and the things that we're producing, when I was just beginning to farm, I was seeing all these farms that were my peers and different people that I had met through networking experiences and all the things they're producing. And it seemed like every other farm was producing perfect things and they must not have had any pests or any weeds. And it made me really critical of my own operation and wondering why my crops maybe weren't looking as good or why I was having so many struggles with different challenges throughout the season. And I had the opportunity to visit a peer's farm in Nebraska who had started at the same time as us and who I had been really holding up as a prime example of a great farmer because of the things that she was posting on social media. And when I visited her farm, the reality of her situation settled in that, in fact, she was dealing with similar challenges as I was, like pests and weeds and different challenges throughout the season. But that wasn't something that was being shared on social media. So while I think it's really great that we're sharing our stories through social media and our successes, by visiting farms, we're able to kind of explore the different challenges that farmers are having that they maybe aren't publishing online. That helped me to reduce some of my own stress as to the things that were happening on my own farm and to be able to ask critical questions on how to improve the process rather than just feeling like I was not doing a good job at being a farmer. When we visited Denise and Larry's farm, we were able to ask them questions about some of the successes and the failures that they've had over the years. They've gone through a lot of different changes to improve their process so that it worked better with their lifestyle or the things that they were more interested in doing. And it gave me a little bit of optimism in terms of being able to be more adaptive in my own operation and not feel so tied into one specific thing. So, making the most of your visit, I think that the visit doesn't have to be a high stress thing, but there are a few things that you can do before you go and while you're there to make the experience really rich for you and be able to take a lot from your experience. So some of the things that we did before we visited Denise and Larry's and before Denise visited our farm was to identify some of the objectives that we were hoping to learn. So this could be anything from something that you've encountered as a challenge or something that you know you want to expand your knowledge on, really anything, and just write it down. Also, do a little research on the person that is your mentor. What do they have that you are seeking? In our case, Denise and Larry have a lot of experience over the years developing their operation, and that was something that we don't have. So, how can we learn from their experiences? Our other thoughts were that it's helpful to plan your visits throughout the season because there's different things happening in the spring than there are in the summer and the fall. And by having your visits throughout the year, you're able to explore some of those different things, be it crop rotation, incorporating cover crop into your operation, whatnot. We visited Denise and Larry's farm towards the end of the season, and we were able to see how they were planting for their fall and season extension crops, and how they were going to tie in their season extension high tunnel to benefit them for extended growing. That was really beneficial to see, just the timing and how they were planning for that as well. Another tip is to write down your questions throughout the season, because likely you're not going to have the questions all at the same time. You might think of something while you're in the field or while you're doing something. And it's really helpful to just have a place where you can write those down. We had a spiral notebook that we kept with us throughout the season, and we would write down any questions that we had or any challenges that we had. And that leads me to my last thought on this list is every month, Scott and I sat down and took a little bit of time to evaluate what was working on our farm and what wasn't working on our farm. Probably the pinnacle moment of this was in June. If you remember, this past June was very dry after a pretty wet spring. And being on a new location, we hadn't, and having a wet spring, we hadn't bought any drip tape irrigation. And towards the end of June, after having hand watered what seems like too many crops, we had a moment where we said, something here is not working. We're spending way too much time doing this. We put down the hoses, we walked in the house, and we spent a little time evaluating what wasn't working. What wasn't working was spending 2 hours a night, every other night, watering our seeds. What we needed to do was invest in drip tape irrigation, and we needed to ask our mentors how they effectively water and manage their crops once they've planted them. So taking the time to document those things as they're happening is really helpful for receiving meaningful insight once you're at your visit, or even at any point you could reach out to your mentor and ask him those questions. When you're at your visit or when your mentor is visiting your farm, it's really important to be open to unexpected learning opportunities. For us, I know it can be really easy to have a really set goal of what you're going to learn, but when you're open to learning new things, you might discover something that you hadn't known about before, or an idea that that they had encountered a problem in the past that you haven't encountered yet. And so it's good to just be open and not be too structured in your mentorship visit. Also, it's good to ask your questions, any of the questions that you had written down or anything that stands out to you while you're at your visit. But then it's also extremely important to listen to the response and to let your mentor share their experience in full. Because again, perhaps they can give you the short answer and it might answer your question. But if you let them give you their long answer, perhaps it'll open up to something that was unexpected that you weren't planning on learning. Again, then to observe while you're there. So when we were at both our farm and at Denise's, we were able to walk through the fields and talk through the way that they had their field laid out and the way that they managed their crops and their weeds and whatnot. So take a time to observe what's similar, what's different, ask what's working and what isn't, and what types of things from your mentor's operation can you take back to your operation to improve what you're doing on your own farm. And then finally, ask open-ended questions. This again leads you to perhaps unexpected learning outcomes and responses that you weren't expecting. So as I mentioned, Denise and Larry are our mentors through the Practical Farmers of Iowa Savings Incentive Program, but it's really important to be open to finding mentors in so many different places. I know that that's really helped shape Scott and I's experience as farmers so far, and just being really open to learning from a lot of different people. So as I mentioned, we rent land from a farmer who's been growing diverse vegetables since 2000. So there are certainly a lot of things that we learned from her. We also talk to the farmers that are at our farmers market, whether or not they're growing vegetables or raising animals. it's really important to build those relationships because, again, we can share our experiences and learn from each other. Farming, in my opinion, is a constant learning experience. You might think that you have all the tools that you need, or all the books that you need, or the best laid plan, but there's certainly going to be unexpected things like weather or um, who knows, crop failure, different things like that, that you'll have to adapt and learn. And from those experiences and those challenges, you can become really creative in your responses. And then again, you as a mentee can become a mentor because you've had those experiences, you've learned how to come up with a creative solution, and you can share those solutions with other people, other beginning farmers, and even your mentors, because perhaps they haven't encountered the same problem. And together you can come up with a good creative solution. Mentors come in many forms, as I mentioned, our formal mentor relationship, but then also our farm landlord. Uh, as I mentioned previously, my peer farmer who I visited her farm our first season, that was back in 2012. We've maintained our friendship, and we've been maintained an openness to asking questions and sharing experiences. And that's really helped to shape my experience in terms of being able to plan and grow as a farmer. Neighboring farmers is also a really great place to seek relationships and mentorships. We are surrounded where we are by a lot of different types of farmers. So our immediate neighbors are not farmers; they're living on a homestead in the rural area, but working in Omaha. But we are surrounded also by large-scale conventional farmers. We have goat farmers down the road and people that are growing their own hay for livestock, and we've tried our best to reach out and make relationships there. We know the feed store owners in town, and by building those relationships and sharing our experiences, we've been able to learn on our own right and also learn from their experiences as well, even though we have different farming methods. And like I said, mentorships are two-way learning experiences. So you never know what skills you might have that your mentors or your peers don't have. That comes back to when you encounter a challenge or when you, yeah, I guess when you come up with a creative solution for something. Sharing those things allows the the findings that you've had and the experiences that you had to benefit the whole farming community. I think PFI is a great resource for that. Social media, again, there's a lot of group pages and networks that are on social media where people are sharing things that they've come up with. And I know for our farm specifically, we've used different tidbits that we've learned from those types of social networks and helped to improve our own operation. It's important to remember that everyone has something to offer. So even if you feel like you don't have that much experience, having confidence in the things that you're learning and being able to share those back to the group just really helps everyone to improve their process. It takes a village to raise a farmer. I really believe that. So I've been really grateful for my experience having Denise and Larry as our mentors, and then also the mentors that we have throughout the community. And I love sharing our own experiences with other people as well and being able to share what we've learned. So I guess that we can open it up to questions. If anyone has more specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Allie. That was some fantastic tips there. Um, yeah, if you have a question for Allie, now's a good time to ask it before we switch gears and let Denise take it over. I'll pull up Denise's presentation here. Allie, I was curious. Um, you mentioned that you went and visited your some friends' farm, Botnaburo. Was that with Denise and Larry, or was that just you and Scott?
No, we met Denise and Larry at their farm.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea to have a mentor meet on a third farm and just to generate other questions and ideas and stuff. That's really cool.
Hmm.
Well, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of activity in the chat box right now, so I'll pull up Denise's and we can just keep rolling. And Allie's gonna be here for questions after Denise's presentation, so if you think of anything, go ahead and put it in there when we pause for questions later.
Okay.
Denise, Denise, whenever you're ready then.
Okie dokie. Hi, everybody. Um, I love doing this because it's so comfortable in my office at my computer. So thanks for joining in, and thank you, Allie, for what. There's a lot of our similarities in our presentations, and we can. It's always good to repeat some of the things that we've learned. And thank you, PFI, for doing this. I really appreciate it. And actually, it makes me have to sit down and think about a few things that I just may not think about. So our farm is north of Atlantic, Iowa. We're south of the interstate, a couple miles, Interstate 80. And it's 17 acres altogether, and we have approximately 5 acres in production. As you see, what I've got here is 72 by 40 or 30-foot, 4 seasons movable high tunnel. I picked some spinach today and had it for a salad tonight before I got started. And I'm really getting geared up to get some carrots in soon. So, and we have a 16 by 48 low tunnel that in the last couple years we've had lettuce, loose leaf lettuce in there. We've had flowers. We tried some this year. I tried a few plants of ginger and turmeric, and so it's kind of turned into like an experimental tunnel, and we put that up years ago, for $250. We got some hoops from a nurseryman who was going out of business, so that was our first experience. We've done tomatoes and green peppers and things in there, again, for experimentation. New for 2017 on our farm is that we're going to put prairie strips and buffers in with prairie seeds, forbs, and grasses. And so we got a small grant, a EQIP grant. And then we've started to disassemble a 26 by 96 foot high tunnel, and I'm exploring the possibilities of doing raspberry or strawberry production in that. Years ago, I had help from Kathleen Dellett to try some experimentation with raspberries in pots. And Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, has a really good website on that. And then I found another one. And it was fairly successful just to start out. It was a small grant, and we did it. And so and the things that I've been reading have been that it can be quite lucrative. So I think, although I talked to Linda Nave, and maybe some of you know her from Extension, I talked to her last weekend, and she said that a friend of hers had tried it, and he's in his 4th year, and it's now coming into being profitable. So I'm not sure. I didn't plan on a delayed time like that, so we'll have to see what happens. So our Omaha is our metro area for our market, which is 50 miles. We have 30 to 40 members in our CSA, the First United Methodist Church, with Sunday morning deliveries. We're starting our 4th year, and in the middle of the month, tomorrow, Amber, who you see in the upper right-hand corner with Annie, Amber has the short black hair, is coming over, and we're making our plan for this next season. So there's a lot of planning that is going to happen tomorrow. We market our produce also through farm table delivery and Lone Tree Foods into Omaha to restaurants and Hy-Vee. I've found that my organic certification, which I haven't mentioned here, has helped me sell into Hy-Vees in Omaha, and there's a number of them that I sell to through Lone Tree Foods. And then I have kale sales going into my 3rd year into Hy-Vee in Atlantic, and it's I'm sheepish to say that the kale is for their seafood display, not so much for eating. And I can hear you guys laugh at me. for that. But it's a sale. It's a good price. I get a good price for it. They love me in the meat department when I bring in the kale, and they're just always so thrilled because they don't like what they get in the off season when I'm not supplying them. So 85% of our income comes from CSA, 10% through the food hubs, and 5% at the local farmers market. Atlantic is a town of 7,000 people. Many people around here have their own gardens, and so I feel that, and we don't quite get our price point that we should in Atlantic, but I believe it's my community service to do outreach and education. So I try to keep a competitive price on my things, but sometimes that doesn't work in a rural town. And those of you who live very rural, you'll understand what I'm saying. You'll for sure. And there it says we're beginning our 4th year with our high tunnel. Last year I started out that I sold plant starts. We just put up a greenhouse. Did I say that in my last one? So we put up a greenhouse last year in September, and I started extra seedlings this year to sell peppers and tomatoes and that at the hardware store in Atlantic. It's a Ace hardware store, or it's True Value actually. And Jack, it's a good friend of mine, and I said, hey, how would you like to just plant a few plants or sell a few plants outside? And so we set it up, and he took a 15% commission, and it went very successfully, I think. And so Jack and I have talked about it, and we're going to do that with more plants and more types of vegetables for 2017. And a side story with that I was sitting in a restaurant one night, probably in September, October, and my husband and I were sitting there, and in walked this woman, and she goes, oh, you had those tomatoes. And I thought, oh no, what's she going to say? And she said, those were the best tomatoes plants that I had, and I want more next year. And that was a real sigh of relief. You could hear, and so that kind of feedback makes me a little bit more confident to go into the next year. So our history as mentors goes back to 1990, and David, who is in the right-hand corner with his little daughter Isa, they live in California now, and he's a teacher in a charter school, but he was a Rutgers graduate in mechanical engineering, civil engineering. And David was very interested in learning farming, so he wanted to go to Kansas, he decided, and Rutgers is in New Jersey, and he grew up in New Jersey and hadn't had any experience outside of that. So what David did was he put together a flyer and sent it to a lot of post offices in Kansas, and hoping that someone would see that he was interested in coming out to a farm and learning, and he got no takes on that at all. And then he looked in the Rodale directory that existed in 1990 and saw us listed there. And at that time we were milking cows. And so he called up, and we said, well, sure, we always need help, and we can try it on a trial basis and see how it works. And we've got plenty of room, and we've got young kids, and so come on out. We can't pay you much, but if you want to learn, here's where you can learn. So, and we've remained fast friends since that time. We visited in California a couple years ago. So, it's having mentees is great in that way. So we began, I say informally, but actually formally we were informal until 1998 when WFAN began the program Harvesting Our Potential. And then we started having, mostly, it was all geared actually to young women. And so our house is big enough and our children are gone that we could offer a housing. So that's a big plus. And then we deducted housing from their pay. Well, not from their pay. We gave them a pay scale, like minimum wage, and figured out. And this has always been loosey goosey. We've never figured out what is equitable. But everybody, we kind of talked about it, and people felt fine with it. One bonus side benefit that we would always get is that all the young farmers that wanted to come out here would live with us, would do the cooking. So I always enjoyed that because we always just kind of eat on the go, and so I really enjoyed that. And Carl asked the question about like an apprenticeship program. Yeah, it's apprenticeship. There's different names for different things, but the program was still just 8 weeks long, and it was. I always felt it was kind of an intro to agriculture, whether or not people wanted to get their feet wet and figure out if they wanted to farm or not, and we've had that happen. People come in that they really want to farm and they're working on it, and other people that find out that there's no way I want to work that hard. So anyway, we've always had pretty been open that way, and not a real lot of structure to it. But Larry and I are kind of those type of people. And the last few years, we've been participating in Labor for Learning and the SIP program with PFI. In the lower corner is our granddaughter, who's been in a mentorship since she was born. So we're hoping that she may, but who knows? At this time, she's 10 years old. And on the right, we have a tree frog that when I saw him that day in the high tunnel on that chocolate green pepper, I took zillions of pictures of it, because to me that is just stunning to have that green tree frog on that chocolate pepper. So these are a few pictures of our interns. You can see we like to have a lot of fun. We like to laugh. We have music or news going all the time. I'm kind of a news junkie, so the radio, we have radios in the barn and in the high tunnel and just about everywhere. And we're polite enough to ask if that's okay, with people if they want to listen to that. And we usually are in the same mindset about that. So we've got different interns here. We've got Annie and Bonnie and Kate and Kevin is our son-in-law that has the beard down there, and Ash. And so this is just a fun picture of kind of the activities. As we put up our high tunnel, and Bonnie wanted to learn how to use the rototiller, and yeah, we just do it's interesting. When WFAN put together their program, a more formal program, because they had a beginning farmer and rancher program, our grant, they really wanted us to be structured and have a curriculum, and that is not my nature. And so ours, because so many times it's an introduction, it's kind of teach as you go and teach as issues come up. So I'm just not as formal as some people. So I think that's a good thing to get across to a mentee, that looking at what kind of program they want to have. Do they want to have a formal sit down, go over all this stuff and have tasks to do, or is it okay to be a little more loosey-goosey? So I'm trying to get more disciplined about having more formal time, but it just always works for me just to be doing hands-on as we're working together. And here's a few more pictures. In the bottom left is we have this wonderful Jordan, who was a high school junior and senior working with us, and we were a part of the Pesticide Action Network drifters. So in the right-hand column, you can see the helicopters that were flying in the fields south of our farm, and we're setting up a drift catcher. I don't think PAN has that program anymore to teach drift catchers. PFI was a part of that as well, but we monitored the air when they'd spray. And then Amber is up in the top picture with some of our CSA members at the church in Omaha. So let's see, I'm trying to go to the next one. There we go. So different forms of mentorship with an employee. Amber came to me through the WFAN program, and it was a loose mentorship. It was off the farm, sort of the one we had with Allie and Scott. And it turns out that Amber lived just 15 minutes from here. And the first day we were in the barn and talking, I just knew that I wanted her to work for me. And so I approached her about that idea, and we worked it out for 20 hours a week. She would come to the farm, usually in the mornings, and then she had a little baby then. She has 3 children under 10, and Walden was just a few months old, so she would nurse Walden and drive over to our house and work for the morning and then go back home. And it has just turned into one of the best relationships. She's coming tomorrow, and we're going to set out our next season, but I don't have her for as many hours as I'd like to. She has a part-time job off the farm, doing the Main Street Economic Development Program in Avoca, which is a terrific opportunity for her to introduce the town of Avoca to local foods and things. And Carl, you're saying you really do not need structure to be an effective mentor. I think that is true. It works for me. So I'd have to qualify that, and it works for me with the 2 programs that I've been involved with. So it depends, I guess, is always that elusive answer. Long distance, Allie and Scott, we were really, we met, and we met those 3 times and looked at each other's farms, and sometimes I think the role of a mentor, and especially in this case, I've always thought of it as a role of a cheerleader, that we can be really encouraging to the people, but to be realistic too and practical. And I think that's some of the things that the SIP mentor, there's several things that they mentioned that I'll talk about in a little while. But yes, mentoring could be more like a family relationship. Our mentors, our mentees throughout the years just become a part of our family. That's how we operate. And our kids and our grandkids, they get to know everybody because our kids are around a lot, and it's always worked for us. I'm not sure that there is a case where it hasn't worked. Again, we keep this in mind that it's an introduction to, rather than a really deep-rooted, deep dive into how you do things. But you get a good idea of how things work overall. So on our short-term 8 weeks, we've had Kate and Ash and Annie and Bonnie, and those are the ones in the last 3 or 4 years. And I went back to look for pictures for others, and that was totally taking me too long, and too dreamy about going back into what those relationships are like or are. So and informally, like Allie mentioned, doing the neighborly thing. I have my own mentors, even at my age and my longevity of farming. Vic and Cindy Madsen live north of me, and I get my chicken feed from them, and they're good, solid PFI members, and we just being able to talk about farming is just, and Vic and Cindy does poultry, so we have a lot in common. She does butchers and egg chickens, layers, and so we have a lot to exchange. And then Vic, we do things like last fall, we talk about cover crops a lot, and I'm still, we've done cover crops for years, but there's so many new varieties of seeds to use. And last fall, Vic gave me some winter wheat. We always use winter rye, but we're using winter wheat this year, side by side of the winter rye, so we can see what they look like and how they break down in the spring. Susan Utes has been a mentor of mine. When we started looking at our high tunnel, we knew that she had a movable high tunnel, and we were really interested in that. And so we went there, Larry and I went there to learn from her, and she's been a mentor ever since, as well as a good friend. And then Danelle Meyer in Logan, she is just like the spreadsheet queen. And I just agonize over spreadsheets. So I'm always asking her questions, how she keeps things straight and how she does things. So, and we have a good friend relationship too. And I'd say mentoring is probably like leaving a legacy in our case, because we want to give people the enthusiasm that things can be done. We've been here so long that it looks like it's doable. And at this point in our lives, we're sort of laid back about it in a way, not really, but we know what to expect, and so we don't have to get so stressed out. And absolutely, Carl, mentoring is like planting seeds for the future generations. I believe that strongly. And then it's a two-way thing, and respect for everyone, everyone involved, and and what experiences that we gain through relationships. And the thing I always learn from our interns is pretty much things like Instagram and Facebook and the technology. I'd say I've gotten pretty good at technology now, but it seems like the younger generation can always give me some really good pointers about technology. Here's a few places that I went to look at. There's for a small farm. Here's an intern handbook, which has some more legal stuff to it. There's the dairy herd one that's more, of course, oriented to dairying. There's MOFGA and a small farm. So these are all nice, good places to go and get some information from to help you be a mentor. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that in the SIP mentorship, it says, my job as a mentor is to pass the practical farmers of Iowa to the next generation, and don't sugarcoat it. I think that's a good point. Only share what you are comfortable with sharing. Your mentee has quarterly updates with PFI staff to tell us how things are going. They survey us when our mentorship is done, but we can contact PFI at any time. We develop trust and a confidentiality in each other, and then then we learn from each other, and it absolutely is. And mentoring is inspirational. In my case, it is. I seem to have this sense of being able to inspire people. I get pretty wound up about it, but this is Amber and her family. So you can see Walden is now, who's in the backpack in the upper right-hand corner, is now a 3-year-old. So he's not that small. Lenny and Ernie so the family comes over and helps us from time to time, and we go over there and help. And so it does, absolutely, this has become a family relationship for sure. And then Amber, what impressed me about Amber in this lower left-hand corner, she likes to do very detailed stuff. So she would put little tiny seeds in her hand and put them in each of the cells of my potting soil. And it's like, whoa, that blew me away. And so she's really good at the detail work. And then Kate and Amber here, this is our former dairy barn, and where we have our washing and packing that goes on. And we're really good, Larry and I are really good about using the resources that we have on this farm. So Larry grew up on this farm. He's been here all of his life except for when he went off to college and to explore the world. So all of the things that are on the farm here, like all the junk in the junk piles, he's grown up with. And a lot of times even though I call it junk, a lot of times that it's valuable. I think you can sort through it and do a good job of sorting. But I think Larry gets nervous if I get on this kick about getting some things into the iron folks. We have a local iron salvage in town, and when the prices were like $200 a ton a few years ago now, I was going through there at a pretty big good clip, and he really thought that maybe some of the old hydraulic things that he had that were probably 50 years old probably could have been used, but I was making that decision, so he maybe wasn't too happy with me sometimes, and yes, I think mentoring can be a form of leadership training. I think you're right on. So this is the last slide. This is our family. It's all about family. In our case, we want to instill that. I mean, the goal that Larry and I had when we started farming, and I came from town. I didn't grow up on a farm, so I learned from him. But what we wanted to do, and we were able to fulfill for most of our children's lives, was to be two full-time parents. And with milking cows and the cash flow that went on then, and this is through the farm crisis of the 80s, we were also farm activists at that time, and it was possible. It wasn't without its stress. It wasn't without its downside. But we were able to raise our kids until our youngest daughter, who's in the picture of our family, she's the one with standing, her husband's the tall one in the back with a blue shirt on. So Kaya's our youngest one, and she's our farm crisis baby. But anyway, she went with me everywhere I went in the 80s as we were on the road a lot, and Larry stayed home and took care of the kids and the farm. And Kaya we were able to milk cows full-time and be full-time parents until she was a junior in high school. So that's been a few years ago. And then the other flexibility that it made it possible for us to be able to take care of our parents on our farm. My father, as he grew elderly, and Larry's mother lived with us for a time, and I was able, with the flexibility of farming in a CSA in the mid 2000s, I was able to take care of our one granddaughter, our oldest granddaughter, and Larry's mom with her illness, and that, again, it wasn't without its stresses and that, but there was the flexibility that I really liked. So I could get all dreamy and things about this, and we just have a short while left. But how long do we have, Steve? We have until 8:30, right?
Yep, that's right. We've got until 8:30, so plenty of
Okay,
time.
okay. So I mean, and I talked really fast, so I apologize if I this is the last slide of my presentation, but I think just to wrap it up, I'd like to say, and Allie may have some things to say too, but it just like CSAs are relational, I think the on-farm interns, apprentices, workers, whatever, are relational as well. Last year, actually last year I didn't have any interns through any programs. I had Amber, of course, was still helping me or was working for me, and I had a mother and a daughter from Atlantic that worked for me. They were my weed pullers, but neither one of them interested in farming. So they but they were more than just weed pullers and workers. I mean, I always feel the urge to teach as we're going through things. So when they were pulling weeds, it was like what names were the weeds and why we were pulling them, and after they worked for me for the summer, they could see that what the results of a good a weed-free, well, not quite weed-free, a good weed management could do on our farm, and they were learning at the at the same time. So kind of with that, I'm open for more questions, or if Ellie, do you have something else that you want to add?
I don't have anything else too much to add. I did make a note in the chat box when you brought up the kale for the seafood department, and that was something that you said shyly, but it was something that really stood out to me, and that was something that I wasn't expecting to think about or to talk about at our visit, and it just gave me good motivation to think outside the box on how we're marketing our produce, and um, just another example of how our mentorship relationship spurs me to be more creative with our farming operation. And who knows, I probably won't try to market kale to the seafood department, but it gives me a good new lens to look at farming with and the marketing of our produce. So, but I agree with you, Denise, that it is all the relational aspect of farming. To me, that's what keeps me motivated when I'm having a hard day on the farm or whatever it is. Just being able to have that community and be able to have a community of people who are all different resources. As Denise was saying, she mentioned our friend Danelle, who has one farm in Logan, Iowa, and she's right. She's a spreadsheet guru. We should get her to do a webinar. But having people like that in your network and just expanding your network to include all sorts of different farmers with all levels of experience, when you run into something and you really feel down and out, being able to turn to those people for cheerleading or for advice or for problem solving, it's invaluable. You really can't put a price tag on it.
Well, and Carl, again, you've added some good to the conversation tonight. You've added some good thoughts and drawing strength from our relationships. And just to kind of put it in perspective, too, so Larry and I started farming in 1976. And I met Larry, and he said he wanted to be an organic farmer. And it was like, wow, that's really something. And we started out, we looked around the state of Iowa for other people who were farming organically, and we found a dairy farmer in Carroll County, and we found another farmer over in Jasper County, and we visited them. So, as Allie said earlier, visiting farms is always such a good idea, and I love the field days of um, of the PFI because I always come away with something learned for sure, and always feeling a little bit more relieved that my weed pressure and my weed management maybe not so bad. I agonize over that sometimes, but so 40 years ago it was it was really difficult to find a mentor. We went and visited those farms, and we were kind of out here on our own. What we had was the Rodale Institute, and we had our thick volume of compost and making and insect identification. Larry had grown up on this farm, so he had a good basic idea of what it was like, what a crop rotation was like, because his father, he farmed in this neighborhood with two other brothers, and they still made hay. They still had a crop rotation. They had beef cows. They had hogs, and so Larry had grown up with this and knew what that sort of thing was about. It's more difficult now with more people coming out of urban areas that have been, captured by agriculture and but have studied environmental studies, and they want to take care of the earth, and so they want to farm, and coming from a whole different set of places, sense of place. And so the thing we had going for us, me not so much because I grew up in town, but the fact that Larry could teach me how to drive the tractor and how to, use the equipment and everything. We had one up on where not many a lot of times people starting out farming these days have none of that experience. And what we're feeling really good about these days, and in the year 2017, is that we now have in our neighborhood, I would say would be a 15-mile radius, we have about 4 or 5 farmers where we can get together monthly for a potluck. And this is something Larry and I have waited for 40 years for, to have that, and to talk farming, to be able to buy our some seeds together and be able to share equipment. So we're really feeling affirmed in what our decisions were a long time ago, 40 years ago, and feel very fortunate to be able to pass on some of our knowledge and to learn from the people who are around us. So, and I see, Carl, you've put on the YouTube on spreadsheet tutorials. I've heard of those, and I haven't tried those, but I'm using QuickBooks, and for my bookkeeping anyway, and I probably, it would do me good to look at a YouTube to look at spreadsheet stuff. Yes, neighborhood potluck is just the best. Once a month we're trying to do that, and in a broader group here in Western Iowa, we're trying to get, there's I'd say, maybe 10 to 15 farmers, and we try to get together, but in the wintertime, and we haven't done that yet, and we're not, it's going to get close to spring here soon, so we've got to make an effort to do that before it gets too late. Anything else?
Well, Denise and Allie, I might have a question. So I liked that that you both said farm visits were just so helpful, and I kind of am wondering. I can imagine for the farm visit, Denise, that you did to Allie. I imagine maybe Allie and Scott were a little, I don't know, nervous about having a mentor, an experienced farmer come over and talk. Is there any advice for navigating that? Because I know also, Denise, you mentioned not to sugarcoat it, and I can't imagine you really, I don't know, making anyone like Allie, feel like they did something wrong. But is there advice for those kind of maybe an intimidating situation on your own farm?
Well, I think it's that the attitude of learning from each other. When I went to visit, I was hoping that Allie wasn't too intimidated by me, because actually I feel like I continue to be in the learning mode, and it's like it's I guess they have a name for that, called lifelong learner. And so I feel like we've learned a few things, and that have been good for us, and we can share that. But I don't ever feel like this is the way you have to do it, and try to be open to learning new methods and techniques. And one thing I like to share, and Ellie, then you can talk to this. I went to, so there were 3 workshops I've gone to this winter. The first one was Ben Hartman from Indiana with his lean farm, and the second one, that was an all-day workshop in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's only a couple hours. It's like as far as Ames as it is to Lincoln for me. And the Nebraska Farmers Union put on a series of they've got one more coming up in February, and that's with Greg Garbos from Four Seasons in Kansas City. But and then the second one was Jean-Martin Fortier, and he was just a couple weeks ago. And then the third person, I know these were all males, but all very successful males. But and that was the Patrice Gross at the Practical Farmers of Iowa. And wow, it seems to me the biggest thing I've picked up this winter in the things, and that I would probably share more and work more towards after hearing their workshops, is really going to minimum and no-till. That seems to be in vegetable production. That seems to be the thing to do, and to keep your soil healthy. And Larry and I are having discussions about that now, because he loves to till, and we both love how the soil feels like a sponge. But now we're finding out that's not the best for the soil, and so there's always there's always things to learn. And I guess to answer your question more directly, Steve, I think I think it's important for a mentor to listen. And I think, you know, we talked about that earlier, to listen and have respect for what that person is saying, and then vice versa for the mentee. If there's suggestions and things that the mentee has that we don't think we're doing it wrong and we have to change, or that we get defensive about it, um, that's not what I see as mentee mentoring. It's an exchange more than it is a passing on of knowledge, you know, formal passing on. Allie, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think to restate what Denise said too about it being a lifelong learning process, you're never going to have all of the knowledge that you need to have the dream farm, the farm as perfect as it is in your dreams when you're looking at the seed catalog. So accepting that it's not going to be perfect when your mentor comes, I think that's okay. Um, and also for me, I guess before I ever had Denise at our farm, or before I even invited people to our farm, I had already visited other farms. And that first farm visit that I ever had to my friend's farm in Nebraska, where she had been producing this beautiful produce, and then that she had weeds comparable to ours, it really reaffirmed to me that farms can look a lot of different ways and that we're always constantly improving our processes and learning, and that they might not look perfect because when you hold yourself to such a strict standard, I think that's when anxiety can come in, or that's when stress comes in. But when you're open to seeing the challenges and seeing the flaws as a learning opportunity, then when we had Denise out to the farm, our farm was not in perfect condition, but we had some really good successes that we were able to share, and we had things that we were able to talk through and ask for advice. So um, maybe if you're feeling anxious about having someone come visit your farm, maybe go visit 3 farms first and see that they're not perfect either. That certainly has helped me to have a different frame of reference when I'm looking at my own farm operation, and just feel less self conscious and more optimistic about the ways that I can improve my own plan.
And I see Carl, yeah, we should listen twice as much as we speak since we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I like that. And Susan, yes, you know, it really helps to see farms. Yeah, not magazine farms. I mean, we all look at seed catalogs and all these small farm things. And then it finally dawned on me not that many years ago that, oh, this is the piece of farm that's in that picture. The rest of it may not look like this, but this piece at this time looks perfect. And so when so if my asparagus looks real weedy, then I go take pictures of my flowers um, or my patches of places that I've just weeded or something, because I mean it's impossible to keep up with that, all of that stuff. But and not saying, I think I would say in our farm over these years that weed management has been the biggest issue. And when Larry and I first started farming, and we farmed about 400 acres, and we had a cow-calf operation before we had the dairy. We sold the beef cows and had the dairy cows. I would be out in the pasture mowing and mowing and mowing thistles, mowing and mowing, and we would chop thistles, chop thistles, and chop thistles. And I would be in my dreams. I would chop thistles, and I would be out on the tractor singing mantras to get rid of I would just do everything, call on all the goddesses and everything, and it just it really helps to see someone else's farm that has these experiences. And of course, when we started farming, and we were very public about what we were doing, we were very open, and because we felt like we were a teaching farm. Um, Everybody, we were in the spotlight of a lot of people, and because they didn't know about this organic stuff, so we felt a lot of pressure about keeping the weeds down. We didn't want people to think that an organic farm was full of weeds. So it's interesting. Anybody else? Kathy's typing.
Yeah, so we'll see if Kathy or anybody else has a question. Otherwise, we may wrap it up in a minute. But it sounds like there is a lot of agreement that on-farm visits are great. So PFI field days are helpful for that. And if anybody also wants to just host any sort of social potlucks with their community, PFI can help with that as well. So talk to us because we definitely want to help you all connect in that way.
Well, and I want to just recap one last thing because the realism of visiting farms and seeing the weeds is really reassuring for the farmers, but it's also okay, like Denise was saying, to celebrate the things that are doing really well and to take pictures of the crops that are doing really well and to share those with your social networks or with your community. Because we should celebrate those little victories, and hopefully over the years and as we gain experience and adapt our processes to fit our farms, will reduce the number of sore spots that we don't want to share and just increase the spaces that we do want to share. But yeah, I think it's important to celebrate the victories too.
Great point. Yeah.
Just for an example, the picture that you see my family there in front of our barn, you see all the it's bee balm, Monarda there, but like that because I'm concentrating so much on the farm that on our fields that are north of our barn and on out a ways from our farmstead. These are my flowers that I've had over the years and they're basically taking care of themselves now because I even though I love them the most, I take care of them the least. So if you looked, it looks really nice in that picture, but if you looked really close, you'd see a lot of weeds, a lot of things that needed to be cut back and things. But it looks nice from here anyway. You're welcome to all the thanks. It's been fun. It's always fun. I think one thing that I wanted to say before we tune off here is that Larry works off the farm during the day, so when he comes home, he's helping, and he's the machine guy at our house. I'm not one that really likes the machines so well. I'll use them, and I know how to use them and take care of them, but I prefer to do my work in the quiet, and so Larry is the teacher of a lot of things, even though he's not here during the day. When he's here at home at night and on the weekends, he's a really good teacher of using the equipment and things. So, and Kathy's right; it's enjoyable to visit dairy farms during milking time if it's possible. And yes, everything. So, thank you all, for doing it. And Steve, you want to take over?
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and all I wanted to add was just a big thank you to Allie and to Denise for preparing these presentations and sharing your insight with us. So we really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for tuning in tonight and asking some good questions. Hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday or some other Tuesday night this winter yet.